is episode 37 of our podcast, Real Voices of Happy Valley, in which Dave talks to local artist Ash, who lives in Fairfield, is of Pakistani heritage and is fascinating. He talks about his discoveries after the death of his mum in Pakistan and wanting to share this with his children and the wider community. He's a really interesting guy, but he's a bit shy, I think, although he's really chatty and lovely, but in the sense that he doesn't have a website. He isn't on Facebook. So we'll find out when his exhibition is going to be on, and we'll let you know. Have a listen.
So here I am in a small but compact studio in Salem Mill in Hebden Bridge with Ash.
Yep.
Good afternoon. It is afternoon now.
Yeah, it's afternoon.
Yeah, it's taken me forever to get here on the bus.
That windy Burnley road.
Yes, absolutely. So, Ash, you need to talk about your art.
Yeah,
Generally, your art and the project you're doing now.
Yeah.
So what sort of thing is normal? What sort of, is there a genre that you can
It's actually going away from quite a lot of things I've learnt within a European context.
Mm-hmm.
That I decided that I wanted to study my own heritage. And my own heritage was from an Asian background, Pakistani background. And my influences at the time were actually black arts, because there was very little in terms of Asian arts in the UK. I was born in Newcastle, and then I lived with my grandparents in the Punjab between 4 and 10.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a considerable influence on my life.
I can see how, sort of, by the time you're 10, you've had virtually half your life in the northeast of England and half in the Punjab.
Interestingly enough, at the moment I'm working on a painting which is bringing up and conjures up a lot of my own artistic practice. One of them is about coming back to this country, forgotten how to speak English, and going to school where you had to really figure out what everyone was talking about. And I remember being in art class. It's one of the memories that conjures up when I'm, talking about the arts. And I remember the teacher asking everyone to do a rainbow. I didn't know what a rainbow was.
Really?
I didn't know if someone described it or what it was, but
Right.
Because she was speaking English, I just didn't know.
So you knew what a rainbow was, but you would have a different word for it.
But I just thought rainbow was a colour of anything, So I just filled the page with the colour yellow.
Right.
I knew it was a colour, but I didn't know what exactly she meant. But that was sort of like just one of the things that happened as I was sort of like going in. Remember my art class. The other one was having to do. I think we were marked for a few years later. Being marked for a piece of work that we were doing. And my work was very decorative, as the teacher sort of said, because my influence from an Asian background and my mum being a seamstress and when she used to do her own sort of dresses and things, they were highly decorative around the collar and things, and it was a direct influence to me. So, and I remember that very, very clearly. And the other thing that I remember, and this is very early on, we're talking about sort of junior school and early sort of senior school, was when I started painting people. They're all white. And that, when I realised, had a massive impression, on me of what am I doing, and that stayed with me for a long time. I was very careful in terms of not seeing everything in a white world, because people, a lot of the depictions, if you at that time in the museums and art galleries, was European artwork, very white, usually going back to the Italian period through to, and you would see sort of slaves in these. Paintings. Brown people weren't depicted as royalty. It's only recently that they're starting to bring these out, sultans of, Turkey and things like that. They've been, they've been in the storeroom for hundreds of years, but never actually put up in art galleries for black people to appreciate.
I sort of learned a little bit about that. A mate, this was going back years ago when we were young, mate travelling around, I think he was in Syria, in a cafe, and a bloke walked, it sounds like the start of a joke, a bloke walked up to him and said, would you like to be in the movies? And, he was talking to going into the square in a nearby town the next day as they were making a film of the life of Jesus. The scene was about the crucifixion. And my mate turned up in the square, in, as I say, I'm pretty sure it was Syria, and he said everyone was white. It was an American film about the life of Jesus, who, legend has it, was from the Middle East somewhere. But all the people in the movie had to be white guys because it was for the American audience. And, as a white guy, you don't think about that until it's pushed in your face. And then you thought, oh my God, that is really normal.
Yeah. I mean, it's very strange, what you realise, and at an early age, you realise that I'm becoming indoctrinated into seeing things as everybody else see it, and that isn't just coming from living in a white community and an education system and society, but it also comes from my own cultural background as well. Because quite easily I could have gone into a very religious pathway if I hadn't said, I don't really believe in a God. I don't really believe in Allah. And you can imagine within a very strict Muslim family, that caused a lot of issues. But interestingly enough, that I can actually go to Pakistan and work. I can actually, but people find it very difficult to understand how I am and what I believe in. Because if you don't believe in God, what is there? And that is the barrier that you face. But going back to this painting, which is, every time I do paint and start painting about personal history, all these things come up in my head, and it's almost like it's almost meditation and going back into your past, and a lot of issues do come in your head, and it's a good thing, but it's not always a good thing. So the painting I'm working on now is of two of my aunties, my mum's sisters, with their village friends on what we call a munja in Pakistan, which is like a jute-based bed, which you sleep outdoors, but you sit on, and they're all sat there. And it's the last photograph that my mum wanted to take back when she came over here and got married. So it's a very significant sort of, saying bye to her friends and her sisters and so on. So I'm depicting that in a sort of very abstract way, using the old photograph that my mum gave all the photographs, to me. And she's no longer alive now, so that brings up a lot of memories. I think only one of the sisters, only one sister of all the siblings, which she had 7, is still alive. So it's
so there's a whole virtually a whole generation.
And I don't want to depict a very the faces are quite ghostly, but and it's also very, very decorative. I'm trying to bring out a lot of the Asian fabrics that my mum used to love to sew and embroider. So, and I can remember all her sort of saris and, dupattas, which is the very thin scarves. And I'm trying to sort of dress these ladies in my own sort of way, in the memories I've had of her fashion and her embroidery. So it's got a lot of memory. So I'm writing something at the back about a lot of these things for my daughter, because it is a present, and she wanted a painting for her 21st birthday.
And it's her heritage as well.
And it's her heritage. And the proudest thing for me is both my daughters and my son are starting to look after a very white education system. And one's finishing her fine art degree. And the other is in the second year at London School of Fashion. And they're starting to look at this side of the family, the Pakistani side. They both remember mum who passed away about 3 years ago. It's a very important phase in my life. So I just started doing a project around my heritage and my personal family. But this also depicts stories from when I was growing up, and told to me by my granddad and my great uncle. Going back,
This is as in traditional,
culturally
traditional stories.
So I'm trying to combine my own artwork, photographs, and stories, and also factual stories of when my mum came to England, her experiences here, also her brothers that came here.
When did they come?
My mum came in 58, and my brothers one of the brothers came after that, but her brother, my eldest uncle, Uncle Rashid, he came here a bit earlier than that, and I'm starting to remember a lot of things he used to say, about politics and religion. And I've started to write things about my Uncle Rashid because he was there for when we needed him. My mum's arranged marriage didn't work out. This was in the mid-60s, and she was a very, very brave woman because she wanted to get a divorce, and this was unheard of. The Pakistani community in Newcastle at the time was very small, and my dad's side of the family had been there for a long time. My dad was a drinker, so this was completely no within the Islamic thing. But I think my uncles, when they came here, they really sort of had a taste of Western life. I remember sort of going when I was very, very young, going into my Uncle Rashid's living room, and he'd have a sideboard full of wine glasses and glass beer mugs. One I took a fancy to, which was a cartoon lady in a bikini with a crab next to her trying to pull her bikini bottoms off. It was very seaside humour.
Yeah.
And I remember him and my auntie, the Sneem, who used to like to be called Tina, a bit more Western slant, and who asked me to taste this weird bit of meat. And all I can remember was this salty, weird texture, and it was ham.
Oh, right.
Which is a big no-no.
Yes.
So they obviously sort of like worked it. And I remember going into my uncle's bedroom, and there was a big photograph of Tina in a bikini lying on a beach. And if you think about traditional Islamic families these days, that would never happen. It would be a big no-no. So there was a huge flirtation in those days, and you could get away with a lot of things in the 60s and 70s because you didn't have the mosque structure everywhere. You didn't have the preachers on your doorstep. You didn't have a community who would look down on you if you were doing something that was perceived not
Oh, I see. So,
righteous.
but that would have come later.
That came later. I think
as the community is more established.
The rise of sort of the mosque system and the more religious community and so on came in the 70s and the mid 70s onwards. So it's and it filtered down into the smaller communities, you know, in the smaller towns. So
that's interesting because you were saying before that as a kid you were influenced by Black American sort of art and culture, which would have been before and overlapping, obviously, with the mosque system in Newcastle.
Yeah.
So, what sort of influences did you get from Black America?
I think the music. I think particularly that the repression that Black Americans faced, and it came out in the arts, particularly with the Black Power movement. I followed, and I forget his name, so I apologise for that. The guy who was the artist behind the Black Power movement and his graphics and artwork. I went to an exhibition a long time ago, and it just blew me away. And it was something, and this was sort of like at the time of apartheid. Yeah. And, you know, it was a very, very sort of in-your-face exhibition. And a lot of people did not understand it. And a lot of people in this country, you know, being in an all-white school, you know, with extreme racism, including the teachers, would actually defend South Africa's apartheid system.
That's a bit scary.
Yes. Well, I think the education system sometimes can be, I mean, it's governed by the government, and, you know, at that time, the government supported in its own way the South African.
I remember in our primary school there was a map of the world, which was largely pink.
Yeah.
And hearing the sort of that sun never sets on the British Empire, didn't fully understand what it meant when he told us that. But you know, we were told that. Yeah. But at least I wasn't aware that anyone defended apartheid.
Yeah,
when I was a school kid.
I think it was very sort of. It came out in racism, basically. You know, why are you in this country? You know, we should have more of an apartheid system. You know, why don't you go back home? These sort of comments were.
Yeah, what do you mean, Gateshead?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was there.
Yeah.
So really, looking at the sort of Black American influence, you got a much more direct impact to people who were looking for inspiration, and then slowly the Asian influence. But there was very few of it, very few that was direct and in your face. And when you're young, you wanted something in your face. I wanted something. I wanted a reaction, you know. And it wasn't until sort of like I left my degree. Yeah. I started actually sort of doing my degree last year. I was told not to use any of the equipment there because the technicians found me doing quite a lot of political posters and printing them over and over again, so they could be distributed in places in Bristol, Bristol, Leeds, Bradford, basically where all the riots were. Yeah, and there were defence posters, defence campaign posters, because the whole community were being attacked by the government and the police particularly. And it was the time of the coal mine. I did my bit with the coal miners' strike as well. And that was scary times. I remember we used to get minibuses to go from Hull to go down to London, to go to the art galleries, because it was cheaper to do it that way than go on public transport. We used to get stopped and turned back because they thought we were going to protest for the miners' strike. Things like that.
Oh,
So
yeah. Well,
it's quite.
I personally experienced that because I lived in East Anglia at the time, and would hitchhike back to Liverpool, which involved going through Yorkshire. And hitchhikers were generally picked up by the police. Which colliery are you from or going to? I'm not a miner, honest. You go to support them. Well, I do support them, but I'm going home.
You didn't. I mean, I think the whole sort of like it's hard because a lot. I mean, like today's society, you get a lot of community who are denied a voice, and that's what happened during the Thatcher years.
Absolutely. So the art project, the project you're on now. To go back to that, exploring your heritage, what sort of form is the art taking?
Well, at the moment, I'm looking at sort of photographs, and I've taken sort of like memories and created paintings already that go back to the 90s. So bringing them out again because those influences were to do with my time in Pakistan as a child. I sort of got a lot of material that I'm going to bring out again, but there's a need now to actually explain what these are. It's about my aunties and uncles wearing incredible decorative things, and my work is when I work on this is quite decorative, the dress sense and so on, but you'll find in sort of very Spartan Pakistani places where it's desert-like, the people are vibrant. The people come out with red and golds and and it's wonderful.
It strikes me. I'm quite ignorant of the culture. I'm not going to try and pretend to know much about it, but I've worked in communities in Bolton, in Bradford, lived in Oldham, worked with communities in Rochdale, and it strikes me that first of all, there's culturally different attitudes towards colour. And then there's variations which I don't understand. I'm aware that, the old things of, those Asian women always covering their hair with scarves. And I'm aware that, women in North Africa have different attitudes to sort of colours than women in places like India and Pakistan. What the differences are is what I'm completely ignorant of. But what I've learned is that there are culturally different attitudes towards colours and combinations of colours. Yeah. So what you're saying makes sense to me without me fully understanding it.
Yeah. I mean, there is a stigma there, particularly if you're coming from a fine art background. My going away from those fine art traditions were on purpose. I was, when you get critical analysis saying that my work was too decorative and quite pretty, I can actually depict something that's quite brutal, but actually make it decorative and submerge it within sort of like a facade, if you like. I do it on purpose because there's hidden elements behind certain things. Asian women get a very hard time, and you don't see that. You might see something that's quite beautiful when you see a scarf wrapped around the face. I do, but you don't see anything that's beyond that. So I like those hidden ways of working. But going back to the paintings and the decorative side of it, decoration is quite important because of my mum and her seamstress. When she died, I had to sort of like deal with everything that she left, and I'm grateful for that because I found envelope after envelopes with bills that were ripped up and just the envelopes that she'd drawn her patterns on, and I kept them. and I'm using them.
That's brilliant.
To do that. That decorative backgrounds are starting to. So my mum is actually within this whole new phase of my work. But I struggled with my mum because the actual seeing her picture, and it's one of the last photographs of her. And I think for the first year, I used to pick it up, start working on it, and just put it away because I just used to get too upset.
Yeah.
And
it's got to be a massive emotional thing.
So after sort of wiping it out and starting up again and started after 3 years later, I'm actually started getting to the core of it. And that's it over there.
Yeah.
And what it is I'm trying to, because the face was very, I've used the actual, the original photograph, and I'm trying to manipulate the photograph in a way where it's not, her face is not sort of like unhappy and sad and lost because she's coming to the end of her days. She was quite ill, and I wanted something a bit more different. So I just kept working with it, and then I started, because she was quite religious, I started doing the background in a sort of because she had the Quran, and I always remember the Quran. I wasn't allowed to touch it because I wasn't religious. But when she opened it up, I remember the pages were a green line and a white line, and a green line and a white line with all the Arabic writing on it. And that's the background, a green line and a white line.
Yes.
And in between on the green lines, I've actually sort of like I'm creating an abstract piece of sort of work, and actually incorporating stitch in it. The red marks are actually stitch work. I'm not as took me ages to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm incorporating, because she was a seamstress and she liked embroidery. And the white lines, I'm going to. There's going to be a sort of like a piece of a writing I wrote immediately after she died.
So there's a whole series of images and paintings when it's done.
Yeah, interesting enough, my mum, when she changed her name after she got divorced from Ashraf, I'm still Ashraf, but my dad's name now. Even though I don't know my dad, but she changed her name to Carnham, and I've asked the family, why did you change your name to Carnham? Who does she? No one knows. She just picked it.
Oh, right.
It's her sense of sort of freedom, I suppose.
Yeah.
She was her own person. She was on her own.
Good for her.
And she lived. She brought up 3 kids, all done really well. And she's got grandkids, all doing well. And for someone who was divorced in the 60s, had nothing to her name, fled her husband because of abuse. You look back and think, wow, what a woman.
Definitely a woman to be admired.
Strong woman, the racism she faced, constantly.
Yeah.
It was an amazing life.
So finally, we're describing what's, to me, I think it's quite a powerful image, especially as you've described it.
Yeah.
Where would people be able to see any of your art?
At the moment, what I've done is I've always set myself deadlines. I've always said, right, I'm going to have an exhibition here. That was a long time ago. I used to have an exhibition almost every year when I thought of myself as a practicing artist. I'm not there yet. I've got a body of work. I've got lots of old work that I'm gathering together. This is quite a personal journey.
Yes, I understand
that. I'm looking at the more wider community. I'm thinking more of an Asian wider community in the UK as well. and I'm looking at it in a way that what I depict and what I say about my family is a very personal point of view.
Mm-hmm.
It's not everybody else's point of view. It's not my sister's point of view. It's not my uncle's point of view. It would never be that. So I'm treading carefully because it's important to get it right for me, you know, and I'm looking it into sort of wanting to have an exhibition and contacting people locally to do that. But at the moment, I'm not setting myself any deadlines.
Well, let us know when that comes off.
Hmm?
Let us know when that comes off.
Yeah, I will do.
Yeah.
I will do.
Okay, well, thanks, Ash. That's been really interesting and enlightening. In
very
various
fast paced.
That's okay.
I hope I got the worms out. All right.
Yeah, that's all right. Oh, well, thanks a lot.